So, this is carrying on from a previous video that I did about looking at my life from the perspective of my soul. I viewed this in a different way in the last few days because I've felt the reality of the heart and mind as actually being tools of whom and for what. So the of whom, they're tools for me, that is me, the soul of me, in my life here in this physical world. So that when I stand in that position where I feel my heart and my mind, what I mean by heart and my mind, that is reasoning of the mind, the problem solving of the mind, the reduction of issues by the mind for problem solving, and the heart as being the seat of emotions. That's a way of feeling and connecting in the world in the way of feelings. So this other part of me is this soul. What does it do? It doesn't think, it doesn't feel in that way, or emotions. I believe it is about connection. What the soul does is it connects. It connects with other souls, principally. And it experiences some things in isolation, I think. So where we have connections with other souls, the obvious ones are with our parents, with our brothers and sisters, with our wives and husbands, with our girlfriends, boyfriends, with our normal friends, good friends, acquaintances. We have a connection with all those people at a soul level, and we make connections with people at soul level. So this is by way of introducing this next phase of my life, which was when I, after the death of my first wife, which to a certain extent was the beginning of understanding what this separation really was, what what was appropriate for, or what were the consequences of certain actions on an outer level, and the beginnings of following a different life. And following a different life is, to a certain extent, it's following the guidance and directions that the soul gets from this invisible world. So this story starts at waking up that morning in Donegal, feeling that this is now over, that it's time to get on with the rest of my life, and then heading back to London, where on the way back, I felt all the kind of depression and sadness and neuroses had disappeared, and it had been replaced by a certain exuberance and adventurousness. And I conceived this idea of, well, I felt what was important in going back to London was to find, to start a new life with a new person, to find a wife. And I conceived this idea, it's kind of a crazy idea, that I would marry the first woman that I asked who would agree. So with nothing really, no material resources, I went back to London and found myself work, found myself accommodation, and started interacting with people. And it's like something had turned on inside me, and this I could see started a reciprocal action in others, particularly in women, that it's like the switch had been turned, that, you know, I was available, I was an interesting person, I was looking for a mate, and I think this triggered a response in other people. Either they weren't interested in mating, they had other ideas, or they were interested. Then it kind of their antennas came up. The proof of this is just recently. I mean, this talking about something that happened in 1980, 81, something like that. And just recently in the 2015s or whatever, I'd heard there was the death of somebody I knew at that time, just partially. But I didn't realize at the time exactly what effect I had on this person. And it obviously, you know, because I'd heard from third parties that she viewed me as the love of her life. And it was interesting because I didn't have that. I don't think I actually ever went out with her more than once. And that was entirely platonic. I'm not bragging about me, but I think it's something that at a certain basic level, things get triggered. Maybe it's not at a spiritual level, maybe it's at an animal level, I don't know. This has made me think about the choices that one's made in the past and why did you make them. And in fact, I actually got married. I think she was the third lady that I asked. The first one wasn't interested. The first one was actually the suggestion of my first wife, Aisha. You know, she said, this person, you know, would be suitable for you. You should, you know, I'd be happy if you married her. So I think that kind of residue was still there when I approached this lady, and she clearly wasn't interested. She was interested in somebody else. So I dropped that entirely. The second person I was interested in, I think she was interested in me, but she wanted to play the game. She wanted to be courted. She wanted to be coy. And I was dim. I wasn't really aware of those subtleties in play. So I looked elsewhere. And the second one basically said, well, I'll think about it. And so I eventually met my what was to become my third wife, and we both actually felt something. She had some receiving about me, and when I was with her, she seemed to be what I was looking for. You know, she was. Well, I don't know what I was looking for, but it was a good connection, and I think a soul connection. So that, you know, we were both positive about it, because she'd had some spiritual experience in advance of meeting me, that her future husband was around, and whatever. She was primed, if you like, for when I asked her to marry me. She said, "Sure, great." So we got married, and this starts this process of bonding with another person, and in that mystical way, the bonding with a man and a woman, brings back the prospect of children, and she conceived pretty much straight away. I can remember the conceptions of the children, and this was proof to me that, well, looking back, it was confirmation to me that, you know, souls exist, and they come into this world at conception. They get blended and melded into a person right at that point of the sperm and the egg uniting. And that action is an action that comes through the man into the woman. So I can remember this as a channel. I can remember this feeling of something coming through me, something, some person, some essence. And this essence is a soul. This essence has a characteristic which I can recognize today when they're in their, you know, middle, late 30s, with both my children, with both girls. So the process starts at conception. And I think how well integrated they are as a product of, you know, how the parents are at that time. I wasn't really mindful of that. But you don't need to be mindful. It's something that happens. And later on, the children are born, and I was present at the birth of both my children. And that was a soul experience where you finally get to meet this essence, this person embodied in a body. Very powerful stuff. Difficult to describe it completely because it is so all-consuming and all-powerful to witness the birth of your children. This starts the process of when you see it in your children, it's a reinforcement. I wasn't married at the time, but looking back on it now, I can see it's like a replay of one's own life. How the self is molded partly by what you bring, what their essence is that come through your parents, partly about what it is that the parents are up to, their condition, and then all the environmental conditions that become relatively unique, even from one sibling to another. The environment is different. You know, for the first child, it's they're the center of the world. The second child never gets to be that. They only ever get to be 50% of the attention of their parents, whereas the first child gets 100%. And whether that's spoken about or not, that's a reality. And it's not something that you can do anything about. It appears to be unfair, but that's a reality. I'm fourth of five, so although I did, you know, I can remember feeling the center of my universe when I was 2 or 3 years old. Growing up, you realize you're part of a community of souls. You know, we call it a family, but they're all souls interacting on a daily basis, on a continuous basis. So this goes on as a parent is the ultimate growing up, is when you take on that responsibility of another generation. That's something that in a way you can't be prepared for. It's something that it's like taking a load on. Once you take it on, you can't predict how it is before you take it on, but once you take it on, it's there. And one of the things that I had noticed, and it's a common thing, people say, oh, I don't have children, I can't afford them. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's how it works. I think as essences are coming into the world, they are given a whole panoply of tools and forces themselves. And those tools and forces interact with the tools and forces of their parents to bring about their survival and development. So the sum total of the capacity, particularly of a father to earn, is significantly enhanced when there are children around. To a certain extent, they bring their own money with them, and you're just a channel for bringing that into reality. So I did notice that my capacity to earn, you know, went up significantly in having children. It opened up stuff, opened me up to wider horizons, and the need of wider horizons. Having to provide for one's children it's like having a whip across your back, because if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? And it was never really much of a possibility, you know, to expect the state to do that job. In fact, I don't think it's particularly appropriate the state does that job. It's a job that parents should be doing. That's what part of the role is. It's tragic when the earning part of the partnership breaks up, so that you know, the state has to get involved, and then I think there's a lumbering along of the relationship, which is very much a second-class relationship, when the state has to provide for the bringing up of children. So bringing children into the world and bringing them up into maturity is something that, again, is the source of continuous reflection And once they're grown up, one looks back and says, well, how did I do? Did I do it well? Did we fail as parents? Did I fail as a father? And I think to a certain extent, everybody fails. Everybody fails and succeeds. You know, the basic thing of being a parent is conception and birth. And you bring that about, and, you know, that's a major commitment. That's a major achievement. From a biological perspective, that's maybe from an animal perspective, the creation of them that is the significant thing. The bringing them to maturity is something that you're doing, but the gift in the first place is something that you have. And looking back on, you know, how did you do as a parent? You'd have to say, well, I could have done better. That's on the debit side of the report card. On the positive side of the report card, well, we did the best that we could do at the time, bearing in mind that we were also fragile creatures and not perfect. Children often have this idea, false idea, that in a way their parents should be perfect. They should know how to do it. They should know, you know, what it is to be a parent. Nobody does that. Nobody can really teach. Nobody teaches you how to be a parent. Maybe your own parents are the only people who teach you how to be a parent, and they do that by osmosis. So if they screwed up, then it's not going to help you particularly. And indeed, I often thought, well, the mistakes that I felt with my father and my mother, who died early on in my life, I wasn't going to repeat with my children. But you inevitably do exactly the same thing that your parents or your grandparents did. And so this thing of merging with souls, merging with wives, husbands, children, this is a major thing in the life of the soul. It's the act of connection. It's the act of merging, which is important. So the next aspect that struck me very much was relating to my relationship with my parents. My mother, as I say, she died when I was 7. She'd been ill for a couple of years, and I had no real memory of her. I'm told by various therapists in my life that that's unusual. You would have memories back to that time. But I believe now that I blamed her for dying and leaving me, even though I was not the only one. I was number 4 or 5. So what can they do? But you do blame your parents. I mean, blame your mother is a fundamental thing. You know, the needs of a child to be nurtured is fundamental, and that's often what happens with the mother to a certain lesser degree, but it's also there with the father. And because my mother had gone, my father was distant. He had his own set of problems, and this complicates this relationship, this melding with your children, your wife, and your parents. So the next event, if you like, that had a significant impact on me was in the death of my father. And for a lot of one's life, one is either one is under the influence of one's parents, for better or for worse, you know, good or bad and indifferent. You cannot put aside what you get from your parents. It's just there. And I had an uncomfortable few years when I was married to Aisha, where I don't think actually in that 7 years, I don't think I actually had any connection with my father at all. I just didn't want to engage with him. His life and my life seemed to be unrelated. I didn't really want him in my life. But then when I was married again, my second wife, particularly in the production of children, that's then there is a connection, I think, between generations which comes about when you have children, and there's a connection between children and grandparents becomes something which is real and connected. And I felt I needed to heal that relationship with my father. So I consciously for a while went to see him, particularly when he was ill towards the end of his life. And I was fortunate to be there when he died. And that, although it's emotional and significant, it is also a great gift to witness somebody leaving. Because it happens from one moment to the next. One moment there is life, and the next moment there is no life. And there is an exit. There is something that energized that body that was there, and that energy that energized that body is no longer there when they die. Then they're just a corpse, then it's just material stuff. And clearly something has gone. It's not just life, it's an essence. And this goes back, makes a connection with conception of one's children when they come in. You're there when they come in, and you're there when they go out. When they come in as children, when they go out, it's your parents very often. So this is a participation in this cycle of birth and death, which is a major soul event. So I think I'll leave it there at this point with the death of my father, and